Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer, and this is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We're going to talk all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. Basketball's here, spring football and baseball are around the corner. We're going to touch all the bases. Logan, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. We both survived the Mississippi Snowmageddon 2019, as uneventful as it was.
Logan, James Spann, man, over in Alabama, who has had this cult following through social media with giving the weather. He was getting beaten up pretty hard over the lack of snow after all of the anticipation. What'd y'all get down there in the Golden Triangle? Didn't you get a little bit?
I didn't see if there was. I didn't see any. I stayed up to about 1:30 the other morning, and it was raining. And then when I woke up the next morning, there was nothing. And like I said, I was watching the weather. I usually don't even I don't care about the weather, whatever it is. I can't do anything about it. I just kind of adjust. But I was kind of keeping my eye on it because I had to make a trip to Tuscaloosa Tuesday night for the Alabama game, and depending on how the roads were, depending on whether I was going to try to make that trip or not. But it was a little chilly when I left Coleman Coliseum the other night. But other than that, there was no moisture on the road, no rain, and no ice, no snow for sure, and just a little chilly temperatures. I saw a lot more snow last week when I went to Lexington than I did down here.
Well, I know that as the system got closer and closer, the projections became less and less, and the air was too warm, and it was interesting. Got everybody amped up, that's for sure. Everybody got excited about the potential of snow. Been a pretty mild winter. It's become a mild basketball season for Ole Miss after that hot start. They've lost three of the last four of the last five now, I think. I'd have to count those up. Let's see who we got, Logan. Help me out here. They lost to LSU, came back and beat Arkansas. Then they lost to Iowa State. They lost to Alabama before that. Now they lost to Florida. Lost four of the last five. So Rebels trying to regain the form they showed earlier in the season. These teams play each other, State and Ole Miss, Saturday at 2:30 at the Pavilion at Ole Miss. We're going to talk about that game. Before we get there, Logan, it's Super Bowl weekend coming up. And, as a Saints fan, man, I have been intrigued by how, not surprised, but how long it's taken so many Saints fans to get past the no call, past the controversy at the end of the NFC Championship game against the Rams. And, all kinds of funny things, signs and pictures on social media and whatnot, and lots of angst on behalf of the Saints. But you move on, man. The Super Bowl is here. It's the Rams and the Patriots, and and I'm still debating whether or not I'll go into the next room and just watch Netflix. But wanted to ask you, what are the most controversial calls you have covered or not covered, or calls that were made or not made as the Mississippi State beat writer? I've got two in mind I'll mention for Ole Miss, but what comes to mind for you?
Well, the first one that comes to mind was just how much the pass interference call against Alabama this past year that was not called, or the one that was called that wasn't, or I forget how it goes, but it was a horrible call in the Alabama game, and it riled up the fans so much. It definitely did not make a huge impact on the actual outcome of the game, but it would have put points on the board for Mississippi State. So, that was kind of the block in the back call. I think it was what it was. And like I said, I didn't really make much of a big deal about it, because the fact of the matter is Alabama would have won that game. Mississippi State would have had points on the board, but Alabama still would have won that game. And there's been a couple of calls over the years. Thinking back, the Arkansas game here in Starkville a few years ago that went into, I think, double overtime, and Vic Ballard fumbles the ball right at the goal line on 1st and goal. He gets down to the 1, tries to stretch it over. The ball hits the ground, bounces up, and rolls out the back of the end zone for a touchback. So, that was one. Playing at Auburn a couple years ago, right down there on the goal line. Vic Ballard again kind of helicopters over the pylon, doesn't touch the pylon. He just kind of helicopters over it, and they mark him down at the 1. A couple plays later, of course, Chris Relf gets upended at the 1 yard line on the final play of the game. Mississippi State does not score, does not win that ball game. Just a couple of, some strange things like that, but nothing just huge, monumental, game-changing plays like you're talking about in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, the stakes don't get higher than that, with the Super Bowl on the line. And basically, yes, if the call is made, a number of things could have happened, but chances are extremely low that they would have happened. Chances are the Saints would have run out the clock, kicked a field goal, won the game. Yeah, they could have fumbled the ball before then. There could have been a bad snap. Field goal could have been blocked, but you're talking about something that was extremely high percentage had that call been made. And I'm looking back, Logan, these calls most always seem to be in the passing game, most of them. You got a couple of goal line situations there and a ball that was fumbled and goes out of the end zone, that sort of thing. But almost always they seem to be in the passing game. And with Ole Miss, I try, Logan, in this type of conversation not to get caught up in the recent events or the ones that are still fresh in my mind. But I go back to that Vanderbilt game this year, the A.J. Brown no catch in the end zone. There are so many things that have to be satisfied at the college level for it to be ruled a catch. But even with that, it just seems like Brown had accomplished that with possession of the ball, taking about 3 steps backwards in the end zone, and then going to the ground, which creates a whole new set of rules there. Very complicated matter to complete the catch, particularly in the end zone at the college level. But he went to the ground, and it was then that a Vanderbilt defender came over and basically knocked the ball away. Lots of review, and ultimately that play that would have sent the game to a second overtime was reversed on replay, and Vanderbilt won the game. Ole Miss had another play after that, but bottom line is, I thought it was a catch. Lots of people did. Wasn't ruled that way. Lots of controversy around that catch. I don't think Ole Miss really would have won the game. I would have tied the game, sent it to another overtime. You never know what happens when you get there. But the Rebels were just struggling so much in the red zone, and Vanderbilt was not. Now, Vanderbilt would have had the edge, I think, had the game continued, but you at least want the chance. And the Rebels did not get the chance. But the one that stands out the most, Logan, I go back to 2007 when Ed Ogeron's Ole Miss team was playing Alabama. That was Nick Saban's first year. I believe 07 was his first year. You got some knowledge there? Does that sound right to you?
Ogeron, that would have been 06, because that was actually when I was in school up there at Ole Miss, and that's, yeah. It would have been the fall of 05 is when he started. That's right, fall of 05.
Fall of 05? No. When Ogeron started at Ole Miss, but I'm thinking Saban at Alabama. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, sorry.
Because they lost to Louisiana Monroe that year, and so that kind of helps me stay on the timeline. Basically,
I think you're right.
Yeah, Ole Miss and Alabama at Vaught Hemingway Stadium there. The Rebels were down by 3, trying to get a late score, trying to win the game, at least extend the game. They complete a 41-yard pass. Seth Adams, if you remember that name, to Shea Hodge, 41 yards, gets down to the Alabama 4, okay? Got a few seconds left, got time for at least one play before you kick a field goal. And as Ed would tell us later, he was going to throw the fade to Greg Hardy. He was going to put his defensive end over there, throw the fade in the end zone. That was going to be the play. Never came about because replay showed that Shea Hodge went out of bounds and came back in bounds to make the catch. Illegal if that's what happened. The debate came on whether or not he was forced out of bounds, which, creates a different set of rules there. And I thought there was not clarity there. And anyway, even if there was, if they thought it was a clear call, they sure discussed it for a long time. What I remember is all the things raining down out of the south end zone. I had already gone down, so I was there in the south end zone where it all took place. And I just remember standing next to Rick Cleveland watching all of that stuff come down. The red shoes gained a lot of mention there. Red shoes came out of the stands. But we basically got as close to the stadium as we could and got our backs against the wall. So it was going to take a really strange trajectory for something to hit us, but that was about as safe as we could get. You know, Logan, they tell you on replay that the play is not going to be overturned or should not be overturned, you know, if there's any ambiguity. If, you know, you don't want to overturn the call on the field, you know, unless it's clear cut. And if there was a replay angle, and there was, to where you could not tell if there was contact to push Hodge out of bounds, you know, to me that created ambiguity. And there was one that kind of left that open. But anyway, be that as it may, it's you know, we've covered those share of calls before. It's always interesting. One thing that doesn't happen is the teams get together and replay it. You don't see that. And I saw that Roger Goodell told reporters this week that was not going to happen, that was not even discussed, although it is in his authority as commissioner to make that happen. All right, Super Bowl weekend. This weekend, the Rams should be the Saints. You know, the problem, and his last thing I got to say about that, Logan, as a Saints fan, it's not like we're the Patriots. It's not like we're going to be there next year. You know, you get in that position, you know, it might be 10 years, it might be never before you get back. So, yes, it's hard to move on. All right, but we will move on. Let's talk basketball, Logan. State and Ole Miss, 2:30 at the Pavilion on Saturday. How are these teams playing as they come into this game, the rematch game? It'll be the first time this season that Ole Miss will play one of the teams that it plays twice for a second time. I don't know if that's happened for State yet this year or not, but how are the Bulldogs playing right now?
Well, it depends, Parrish, on you know, where they're playing with. It's kind of just a difference between just how they shoot with the Nike ball. They have just, for whatever reason, when they go on the road and they play a Nike team, they can't shoot a three to save their life. The last two games especially, they've made – I mean, Mississippi State's a team that just thrives on the three-point shot. I mean, that's how they get most of their points. And, you know, going to Kentucky, going to Alabama this past Tuesday, they've made 3 3-pointers in each of those ball games. This is a team that usually probably shoots 9 to 11, has 9 to 11 makes a game at the three-point range. And, you know, for whatever reason, they just can't put the ball in the bucket. They talk about how slick the Nike ball is compared to the Wilson ball that they play with at home. And, you know, they've gone as far as, you know, practicing with the Nike ball before they go on the road to those places. But for whatever reason, there's apparently a difference in those basketballs, and Mississippi State players just haven't been able to make that adjustment yet. But, you know, Tuesday night, Mississippi State had an opportunity to win at Alabama. They played the worst half that I've seen them play. Now, I wasn't out in Las Vegas and saw that poor first half that they had against Arizona State earlier in the year, but just did not play well at all in that game, Parrish. They didn't shoot free throws well. They missed 10 free throws. They were 3 of 19 from three-point range. Abdul Adu just goes missing on offense. He went at Kentucky. He didn't have a shot attempt. Against Alabama the other night, he did not have a shot attempt. So, you know, when your starting big man doesn't put up a shot, I mean, he did put up some shots and got to the foul line, but he didn't have a field goal that actually counted as an attempt during that ball game, either one of those ball games. So they've got to figure out to get some offense out of him. And then, of course, they lost Nick Weatherspoon in the final minute of the first half against Alabama the other night. He went up for a big dunk attempt, kind of started his jump a little too early, almost took off from the free throw line, ended up dunking it into the rim. Ball pops up, and an Alabama defender kind of he wasn't malicious with what he did. He just kind of ran into his leg while he was in the air, and it awkwardly ended up injuring his left knee. They had an MRI yesterday. You know, results came back negative, but they still don't know how long he's going to be out. So, you know, we'll talk to Ben Howland on Friday to find out, you know, what his availability and what his status is going to be moving forward. But at least, you know, there's no ACL tear or anything like that. But, you know, that is a big question mark. You know, Mississippi State starting shooting guard for the Ole Miss game coming up. But Mississippi State didn't play very well against Ole Miss to start off. That first game. You're right. This is Mississippi State's first time meeting an opponent for the second time this season. Henson had such a big game. Mississippi State's they've really struggled stopping the other team's power forward for whatever reason this season. Eric Holman has not played very good defense in SEC play. He's kind of been mostly like a turnstile out there. I mean, guys are driving past him. I don't know how many dunks Alabama had. They had to be close to double-digit dunks, and most of them were uncontested dunks the other night. Mississippi State's defense has really let them down, and even as poorly as they played, they had a chance in that Alabama game. Cut it down to 4 different times in the final minute of that ball game. Just could not get over the hump as hard as they tried. They couldn't get it. They had a poor game inside. Alabama scored 54 points in the paint the other night. So Mississippi State's interior defense was just awful between Abdul Ado and Eric Holman.
Well, I tell you what, you mentioned Blake Henson, and he certainly was the star of the Rebels' win in Starkville. There were other stars, but Henson with 26 points, a career high, 5 for 11 from 3. He hasn't approached those numbers since that game. I want to say he's reached double figures twice. He really was a non-factor in the Rebels' overtime loss, 90-86 at Florida on Wednesday, playing in his home state, probably amped up a little bit. Fouls out in 20 minutes. So not much impact there at all. I think he was 1 for 3 from the floor, 2 points. I mean, look, this is a guy who this is a different team, as you saw in Starkville when he plays at a high level. Yes, he's a freshman. He's an immensely talented freshman. He's a freshman who has started from the beginning of the season. So, he's got experience under his belt. They really need to see him take another step. Hopefully that will happen this year. Sometimes it doesn't for these guys, but he's got some minutes now. He's got a lot of minutes to draw on. They're different when he scores because there is so much reliance on those 3 guards. Devontae Shuler, one of them, has been playing at less than full strength with a stress fracture in his foot and still being, pretty effective, but not like he was before the injury. So most of the scoring falls to Terrence Davis and Breon Tyree and, whoever else contributes like that. But bottom line is they're different when Henson scores because it gives them that something from one of their bigs, not their 5, but from the 4, just something different there. It would be a real boost to Ole Miss if he had that kind of game again. And we'll see if there is something to the fact that State doesn't guard the 4 that well. Maybe we will see the Blake Henson who puts the ball on the floor and plays with confidence. Maybe that ball will feel good to him at home. He was 5 for 11 from 3 against the Bulldogs in Starkville. He just hasn't been that effective since. Another thing about Ole Miss during this stretch, Logan, it seems like you plug a hole here and a leak sprouts from somewhere else. They got killed on the offensive glass and with live ball turnovers at Alabama in a 74-53 loss. They were better against Iowa State, had only 8 turnovers. Just didn't get killed on the offensive glass like that. But they couldn't defend. Iowa State, which I will grant you is a very talented team. I think it's a team capable of a deep NCAA tournament run. That's fine. You don't let that team come in your gym and shoot 69.1%. Maybe they come in and shoot 55. But almost 70% shooting for Iowa State in that game. You've got to compete better in that game. And defensively, defense has kind of been the thing during the stretch. We saw strides for this team in the non-conference, and now we're just we're not seeing that same team defensively. They look a step slow in spots, particularly in the post. Okay, we knew the Rebels would be deficient in the post. No real depth there. You do what you can with Dominique Olenichek and Bruce Stevens, and you're going to get quality minutes from those guys at times. but there are also times when neither of them are very productive, and that really hurts when that happens. But when Ole Miss was winning games, it wasn't just those two guys defending in the post. You would see Terrence Davis in there. You would see Devontae Shuler in there. You would see guys with hands in passing lanes and tipped balls and leaping and blocking shots. That happened late in the game in Starkville. Not seeing that as much from this group right now. You go to Florida, a game where they're coming off a tough loss to Iowa State. They didn't play well at home. They're trying to collect themselves and regroup and get back in the win column against a Florida team that was doing the same things, trying to grind out a win. They had won their last two SEC games, but they had gone on the road to TCU and scored only 50 points. They were really struggling offensively. This is a team that was last in the SEC in field goal percentage in overall games, number 11 in conference games. I want to say they were shooting about 42 or 43% in conference games. Well, you hold them to about that in the first half, but in the second half, you let this team shoot 56%, 13 for 27 from three out of 4 from three-point range in their last 4 attempts, 2 out of 3 in overtime. They get to overtime by hitting a 25-foot three-pointer. Kevon Allen, who was 0 for 6 at the time, gets his only three-point shot of the game. It's a big one. I didn't see it, Logan. I didn't see the game. I'm told that it was contested fairly well by KJ Buffin. Guy knocks down a shot. To me, those are the kind of plays that are made when you are struggling with confidence. You're giving up shots like that when you're just a step slow and out of position. Those things seem to bite you. I just sense that that's where this team is right now, very different from where it was 3 weeks ago when the Rebels were riding a 10-game winning streak and had the big week with wins against Auburn and Mississippi State. It's a different team right now, but because this team was there, I think they at least have that to draw on, need a spark. Maybe something can get them going in that direction again. But right now, it's a team that isn't defending well throughout the game, maybe defends well for stretches. They shot it better against Florida than they did against Iowa State, but just a lot of gaps right now, some holes to fix for Ole Miss before they can get back into really what had become a very meaningful NCAA tournament conversation for them.
Yeah, and for Mississippi State, it was a tough stretch. 4 out of 5 games on the road. If they win on Saturday against Ole Miss, they'll kind of break even over that stretch. But you come back next week, Mississippi State's got a tough. Even though they got both games at home next week, they're playing what looks like to be the 2 best teams in the SEC. They got LSU and Kentucky next week. So yeah, it's going to be a struggle for Mississippi State. And right now, offense really isn't the problem. Like I said, there is a disparity between the 3-point shots on the road with the Nike ball and the 3-point shooting at home. In Saturday's win against Auburn at home, Mississippi State was 13 of 30 from 3-point range. So that's shooting pretty good. And then you go from 13 3-point makes to 3 when you go on the road to Alabama. So, Mississippi State's going to find a Nike ball when they get to Oxford on Saturday. So we'll have to see how they deal with that. I've never really paid attention to the brand of balls. It really just hasn't seemed like that it's ever made that much of a difference. But, this is a couple of weeks in a row now where you've heard players talking about that Nike ball and what a difference it is from the Wilson ball that they use.
I've never heard that as part of the discussion either. We got about 3 minutes left, Logan. Real quick, what's the number 1 position competition going on for MSU baseball right now?
Well, I think it's the weekend rotation. I mean, they've got Ethan Small to kind of handle that Friday night, kind of be that ace for them, but they've got a couple of guys in the mix. You've got a first-round draft pick in JT Ginn. You've got Keegan James coming in there. You've got a Peyton Plumlee coming off a year's suspension from the NCAA coming back. So there's a few guys there working into the mix, trying to get that Saturday and Sunday slide. And Mississippi State's got to replace their second baseman and shortstop as well. So there'll be a brand new face at second base, brand new face at shortstop this year. So the shortstop's pretty well handled. I think Jordan Westberg has kind of won that position, but they got a few guys kind of still battling it out there at second base.
All right, Rebels trying to figure out a pitching rotation too. Ole Miss has decided though on Will Etheridge. Mike Bianco basically has given the ball to last year's setup guy as his #1 Friday night starter. So a transition there for Will Etheridge. I think the #1 competition going on for Ole Miss right now is at second base, and it's from two guys who competed there last year. Anthony Servideo was a freshman then, and Jacob Adams was a first-year junior college transfer. Adams won that job then because at the start of SEC play, he was hitting about 100 points higher. Well, these two guys may carry that competition into the pre-conference schedule again this year. We'll see. Servideo went on to freshman all-SEC honors, just a remarkable defensive player, really stepped in and made a seamless transition in the SEC tournament championship game. Some other times when he had to fill in for Gray Kessinger at shortstop. So interesting competition going on there at second base for Ole Miss. Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Come back and join us next week.